from the border of Ukraine, but we also see that significant forces remain there, significant equipment remains there. We're monitoring the situation.
Let's speak to Ben Aris, a former Russia reporter, currently the editor-in-chief of BNE. Ben is in Berlin. Ben, welcome to the program. Help us understand how Ukraine has become such a pillar of Joe Biden's foreign policy. What is it about the country that the US is so interested in terms of supporting Vladimir Zelensky?
Well, Ukraine lies at a strategic crossroads in the middle of Europe, and the US are very keen not to see that it fall into the hands and go back under the Russian sphere of influence. And Ukraine itself has expressed a very clear desire in order to turn to the West to hook up with the European Union, where the standards of living are much better, the rule of law is in force, and in that they have to reject Russia, which is going to dominate their local politics. The country could be overrun by Russian oligarchs who have less than best business practices. And the US has embraced that and welcomed Ukraine in that effort. But it's been a long, fraught process because at the same time, there hasn't come with concrete offers to join the European Union, nor NATO. In fact, those offers have been explicitly not mentioned. And Vladimir Zelensky has been touring Europe in the last weeks. He said pointedly that we can't, as Ukrainians, sit in the waiting room forever. You need to give us a concrete commitment to when the accession processes can start. And he got no reply to that question. So Ukraine's been left in limbo between the East and the West. Nevertheless, they had this Russian troop surge on their border, and America's there to make sure that Russia doesn't force the issue by invading Ukraine or using the threat of an invasion in order to persuade the Ukrainians to turn back into the Russian sphere of influence.
Sure. I mean, you're mentioning the military aspect of what's been happening on the border there. There are those two separatist regions in eastern Ukraine as well. What about politically and away from the public eye? What do you think the White House and Washington will be doing to prop up Vladimir Zelensky, to make sure that people continue to support a president who has an anti-Moscow stance?
Well, this whole last few weeks has actually played very well for Zelensky. And I must say that having sort of flip-flopped and been fairly indecisive for most of his term so far, he suddenly looks a lot more presidential. And he's, as I say, been touring Europe. He went to Brussels, he went to Turkey, he went to Poland. And he's had this very clear message, like, enough's enough, we need help. You need to let us into the EU, you need to let us into NATO. And even though those things have not been promised and are very unlikely to happen, to the Ukrainian people, it's exactly what they want to hear, is Zelensky standing up and arguing the case and saying that we need these things. And his popularity has been sinking rapidly in the polls over the last year. And suddenly in the last month or so, it's started to improve. Which is important because then he manages to keep the initiative, and he's the best president or the best hope of reform that we've had in Ukraine for a decade. He says all the right things. Reforms have happened under him. The energy sector, the banking sector have been improved. But he needs to deliver on the economic prosperity, and he needs help from the Americans, his Western allies. He needs money, he needs investment, he needs technology, he needs some military support in order to face down the Russian threat, and he's not getting much of that.
Ben, always appreciated. Thank you very much indeed, Editor-in-Chief of BNE, Ben Aris.